MCAT 2017 Cram, Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, Passage 27, Deconstructionism and Literature. As you view the reading of the passage, you'll notice some highlighted snippets of text. What I want you to do is garner meaning from these specific selections in order to answer the foundations of comprehension, reasoning beyond the text, and reasoning within the text questions that follow. And remember, if you feel like you're on the edge and you've had enough with studying and you're on the verge of doing something heinous to yourself, no one cares, but I care. So just suck it up, pansy. Good luck, happy reading, and happy studying. Paragraph 1. Deconstructionism, as applied to literary criticism, is a paradox about a paradox. It assumes that all discourse, even all historical narrative, is essentially disguised self-revelatory messages. Being subjective, the text has no fixed meaning. So when we read, we are prone to misread. Deconstructionism emerged from Paris, and notwithstanding means in spite of this, its claim to universality has an evident history. It is a manifestation of existential anxieties about presence and absence, reality and appearance. It developed via structuralism, with its emphasis on semantics and symbolism. Paragraph 2. From these sources, it derived its fundamental premise, the endless slippage of the subject, the futility of any attempt to name reality. The premise suggests the attendant on the collapse of the two major forces in the 20th century, European thought, enlightened humanism, and idealistic Marxism. Despite its origins, Deconstructionism found its own best home in the United States, that historically dissociated construction of random meanings. America is deconstruction, said its leading proponent, Jacques Derrida. Paragraph 3. By the 1970s, deconstruction filled, perhaps better emptied, the gap left in humanities in the United States by the demise of the old new criticism. But what began as brilliant and creative analytic performances soon became classroom pedagogy. Throughout the decade, the seminar rooms of U.S. campuses and the campuses worldwide became workshops in deconstructionist practice. Junior misreaders worked away, becoming more like CIA operatives. Decoding false signals sent by a distant enemy, the writer. Paragraph 4. Deconstruction exalted itself with ever higher pretension. Pretension means a claim or assertion, or the assertion of a claim to something. As one academic critic exalted meaning show or feel elation or jubilation, especially as the result of success. The history of literature is part of the history of criticism. Deconstruction transformed everything into social commentary, easily making affinities meaning a spontaneous or natural liking for someone or something, affinities with sexual and racial, politics, two other militant philosophies that challenged the sanctity of text. It presented itself as a super-ideological mode of analysis, exposing the ideological aberrations. Aberrations meaning a departure from what is normal, usual, or expected, typically one that is unwelcome, of others while seemingly possessing none itself. Paragraph 5. Any resistance that deconstructionists encountered was usually interpreted as a censorious ignorance. As their approach prevailed, gangs of neo-deconstructionists descended on the library with their critical services. One would demythalize. Okay, I see. They have some crazy ass words. One would demythologize, another decanonize, another defallicize, another dehegemonize, another defame. Literature, as the deconstructionists frequently prove, had been written by entirely the wrong people for entirely the wrong reasons. Soon all that would be left of it would be a few bare bones of undecidable meaning not able to be proved or disproved, discourse, and some tattered meaning torn in poor condition, leather bindings. This frenzy would be called a conference of the Modern Language Association. Paragraph 6. The point that needs to be reaffirmed is that writing is an existential act, an imaginative exploration of ideas. It is, in fact, an expression of moral responsibility. Literature is not a subordinate category of social criticism. When writers are censored, imprisoned, killed, or threatened with death for their writings, it is not because of their discourse. It is not because their discourse is undecidable. If we are to take authors and their fate seriously, we must recognize that fiction is more than an opportunity for word games. We must honor it as a mode of radical discovery. That's it. Actually, I lied. That's not it. Paragraph 7. We need an ambiance around writing that affirms its nature's creativity as art, and that in a larger sense considers creativity a prime power in the making of intelligence, feeling, and morality. This was the position from which Jean-Paul Sartre, with his freedom-affirming existentialism, started the post-war debate of which deconstruction is a latter-day development. He started it because during the 1930s, the word had been defamed, damaged the good reputation of someone, slander, or libel, and disfigured, the book burned, and the writer erased by forces that lay outside criticism in history. By this, I think he's referring to World War II. Yeah, so usually when writers bring that up in the 1930s, they're usually referring to World War II, I believe. All right? Okay, now this is it. No joke, no lie. Which of the following statements best expresses the passage author's message? Is it A, the true meaning of text can never be decided? Is it B, most literary criticism is now deconstructionism? Is it C, deconstructionists and existentialist critics compete? Or is it D, the most salient issue of literary critics should be creative merit? I'll give you a moment to think. You may have to go back to the passage for this one. All right. Okay, so this is a foundations of comprehension question, which means that it wants you to understand the central theme of the passage, okay? So let's get to it. The author describes deconstructionism as a movement rooted in, quote, anxieties about reality and appearance. This is stated in paragraph 1, and that adopts that view that, quote, text has no fixed meaning, also stated in paragraph 1, and posits, quote, the futility of any attempt to name reality. Now that's stated in paragraph 2, okay? The author describes the rise of deconstructionism in order to set the stage to push back against this viewpoint in direct opposition to the view that all text is, quote, undecidable discourse. He argues, quote, when writers are censored, imprisoned, killed, or threatened with death for their writings, it is not because of their discourse being undecidable, okay? Therefore, this is mentioned in paragraph 6, but this also means that answer choice A is wrong. It's not the right thing. The author describes the popularity of deconstructionism, especially in the 1970s, but does not explicitly state that most literary criticism today falls into this category. So answer choice B is a no-go as well. And the author highlights some tension between existentialism and deconstructivism, but doesn't talk about competition among critics. This is misstated. It's a no-go. By default, the correct answer choice is answer choice D. Here's why. In contrast to the deconstructionist view, the author believes that, quote, the point that needs to be reaffirmed is that writing is an existential act, an imaginative exploration of ideas. You can find this stated in paragraph 6. The author believes that writing is an art and that fiction should be honored. Therefore, this suggests the most salient meaning important, issue for literary criticism should be the consideration of creative merit. Okay? All right. The passage implies that the declaration, America is deconstruction, found in paragraph 2, means that A, the constant revisions typical of U.S. culture capture the spirit of deconstructionism. B, literature produced in the U.S. is especially suited to analysis by deconstruction. C, U.S. literary critics developed these scholarly methods adopted by deconstructionism. So I'll give you a moment to think. The answer may pop out at some people, but if it doesn't, that's fine. You can go back to the passage to search for your support to select the correct answer choice. All right. So again, this is the Foundations of Comprehension question, which means that it wants you to be able to figure out what specific words or phrases mean within the context of the passage. And the phrase here is America is deconstruction. Okay, so let's dissect this a little bit. Okay, the paragraph describes the United States, paragraph 2 that is, as a home for deconstruction because it is known for, quote, historically dissociated construction of random meanings. This phrasing suggests that America and deconstructionism have in common a lack of consistency in interpretation. Therefore, the correct answer is answer choice A, okay? The passage doesn't discuss where the literature that was analyzed by the deconstructionists had been written, so you can't make the assumption that it's US literature, okay? And, you know, this doesn't imply that US literature was particularly suited to the approach. The passage states that deconstruction emerged from Paris and that the analytic methods were first introduced as part of instruction in the US. That means something totally different. Finally, it doesn't assert, the passage that is, that the US critics played any role in developing the methods that were applied, okay? The passage suggests that deconstructivism shares, quote, affiliations with sexual and racial politics, but doesn't assert U.S. higher education is controlled by any of these agendas, all right? So, yeah, A is your answer. What is the author's primary purpose in discussing deconstructionism in paragraphs 3, 4, and 5? Is it A, to denounce its triviality in order to strengthen the case for a contrasting vision? Is it B, to acknowledge its existentialist principles in order to propose an extension of these principles? Is it C, to reveal its lack of sympathy for writers is an argument for a more courteous manner by critics. That sounds really ridiculous. That might not be the answer. All right, I'll give you a moment to think. Okay, so in this Foundations of Comprehension question, you have to figure out the purpose of expressing specific ideas within the context of the passage. The author offers a narrative of increasing deconstructionist zeal that attacked literature until, quote, all that would be left of it would be a few bare bones of undecidable discourse and some tattered leather bindings, okay? The extremism of deconstructionism is contrasted with the author's belief that, quote, writing is an existential act, an imaginative exploration of ideas. And this is mentioned in paragraph 6. This juxtaposition of descriptions was done to help denounce deconstructionism and strengthen a contrasting vision. Therefore, answer choice A is going to be correct. The author does not portray deconstructionism as having existentialist principles. In fact, he contrasts deconstructionism and existentialism in the final paragraph when he states, we need an ambiance around writing that affirms its nature as creativity, as art. This was the position from which Jean-Paul Sartre, with his freedom-affirming existentialism, started the post-war debate, okay? The main point of the passage is to basically criticize deconstructionism. The author doesn't simply believe that the deconstructionism movement that it wasn't courteous to authors. This is really silly sounding, actually. Although he argues deconstructionism both defamed authors and claimed that literature had been written by entirely the wrong people for the wrong reasons in paragraph 5, his main point is not that reviewers should be more courteous, but rather that deconstructionism lacks a fundamental appreciation of the nature and value of writing as an art form. So there you have it. A is your answer. According to the views of the passage, a responsible review of a stage production of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar would probably A. Point out evidence that the play promoted the interests of Shakespeare's gender and class. B. Argue that Shakespeare distorted history unintentionally because of his limited knowledge. C. Assume that Shakespeare's presentation of events reflected his artistic sensibility. I'll give you a moment to think. All right,